I'll call the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019 to order. Let the record show that Mr. Nutting will be joining us a little later today, but he is coming. With that, we'll get started on our agenda. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of our previous meeting from 3/26 of 19. Any revisions or corrections necessary? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Smith, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding parking pay station shelters. I think Marianne will walk us through this one. We've got some samples in our packets of what we are looking to purchase. It's just a matter of making some choices, I think.
Yes. So as part of the parking modernization project, as I like to call it, we are installing pay stations. I included in your packet an image from Duluth that I took while I was on vacation there. And you could see this image from Duluth's parking lot. It was a very large parking lot, and one of the things that I liked about their pay station was it attracted a lot of attention. So even though you were in a large parking lot, you could see where that parking pay station was from a far distance. The other value of the kiosk is, or the shelter, is that it protects both the person who's using the pay station, and it protects the pay station itself from weather. So I talked to other communities and looked online for vendors that provide these types of shelters, and I received 3 quotes, 2 of them being standard type products, and then one from Wausau Canvas, who would make it here in town. Their pay station is a little bit more expensive, but again, it's the only one that can provide the nice graphics, and it's a local vendor, which I think is great whenever we can do business locally. This is not considered a public construction project, so we're not obligated to take the low bid. But I was just, wanted to make sure that the committee would be good with perhaps picking a vendor that was not low, and kind of giving you some insight of what we're intending on doing.
The right away, without even looking at the pricing for them, when I saw the samples, or at least the renderings of what these may look like or could look like, I was stricken right away by the pay station sample that would be done by Wausau Canvas, because we were able to get the logo on it, or we were able to get something uniquely Wausau, and then also give that work to a local firm, which I think we've favored local firms before, even when they are a little bit more, just because economically there's dual benefits when we can patronize a local business.
Yep.
Committee members, what are your thoughts on the different designs? Mike, go ahead.
One question first. On the Wausau Canvas kiosk, does that have sides? Are those like plexiglass or tempered glass sides?
Yes.
Okay. And then it also, because the Wausau Canvas one was very close in price to Parkut, but Canada Kiosk was like a lot less, but said plus shipping.
Right.
So I imagine, I don't know what the shipping would be, from Canada, but cost, I think, the cost would probably come in line between all 3 units.
Right.
I do like the Wausau Canvas one because of it does seem to offer a little bit more protection. And with the clear sides, definitely it does look attractive. And I've seen, similar type boxes in other cities, and I would tend to agree that, something sheltered like that would be nicer to use than some of those open kiosks.
One other thing that I forgot to mention is the police department is interested in putting up some cameras and using these facilities to accomplish that. So in talking to Wausau Canvas, it would be easier for them to, I guess, make some modifications, perhaps a little piece of metal on the top that would
For the mount,
allow
for the camera?
camera to be fixed onto, and then you'd get that height that I think the police department is looking for. So it will serve another purpose, and that is to provide some needed surveillance, I guess, for lack of a better term, for the police department. And it's not going to go on all of them. I'm not certain.
Just at
which-
select locations.
Yes, I'm not certain which ones, but problem locations.
So would the top on that Wausau Canvas kiosk, would that be like a canvas or like a vinyl type material?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it has, in talking to them, they're very fade resistant now, and we would get a good life out of it. And they can do it so, because there will be a light inside them, and they can do it so that, for example, the logo would light up the skyline.
So you'd see the light through
or
it from the back?
Right, or
Oh.
the language, the parking registration. Even though they're not used during the night, because we only have paid parking from 8 to 6 PM.
It is nice to have some extra visibility
Yeah.
for it, though. Dennis, go ahead.
On the par cut, it shows that shipping is $8.50. Is that for all of them, or is that per unit?
Per unit, my understanding.
Per unit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is kind of an equalizing factor. I mean, if
Yeah.
that shipping from Canada is even close to that, we'd be right in the ballpark with all of them being real close. You know, I
Well,
mean,
yeah, the
if-
time you paid $8.50 times 8, and then
Yeah.
you add it to that per, yeah, that's a significant difference and so
Mm-hmm.
on. All right, thank you.
all right. And so in terms of committee action, are you looking for us to just select a design and vote on a design?
Sure.
And just
Wouldn't
direct
mind.
you to
Yep.
purchase whichever one they like?
Yep.
Any further discussion? I guess, do we have, the consensus seems that it is kind of that we like the Wausau Canvas sample. Is there a motion to select the Wausau Canvas sample and direct staff to move forward with the purchase?
Wouldn't this have to go to the council to be purchased?
Well, we have parking budgets already established that it would come from, so I'm not looking for a budget modification. I just felt
Just
for
a design choice?
transparency purposes, since we weren't going with low bid, that I would just bring it here. Because it's really not a sole source, because I got quotes, but I just thought it wouldn't hurt.
I really think this, since we're not taking the low bid, this maybe ought to go to council for a vote. I think it'll turn out the same way, but
Okay, you can do that.
We could do it. Do we have a motion then to select the Wausau Canvas proposal and then move it forward for council approval? Motion by Smith, is there a second? Second by Kelbach. Further discussion or questions? Mr. Nutting?
Forgive my tardy appearance.
It's okay.
That option that's being chosen, again, if you could clarify the ability for it to withstand 40 inches of snow.
Yes, it would definitely be able to do that. Well, 40 inches is quite a lot, but I think most of it will fall off of it, but yeah, it will be fine.
All right, punctures, rocks being thrown at it, et cetera.
It should
I'm
be,
pulling things out of the,
yeah. I hate to commit to those things because I didn't specifically ask about meteors and things like that, so I don't really know.
I'm just looking at one of these that has a metallic metal type roof, et cetera, versus I don't know, is this actually a canvas tent type roof, or is it a?
It's very strong, similar to what's on the 400 block for the stage, or a lot of the awnings that you see in storefronts today.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, the fact that they can customize it with a logo and make it unique to the Wausau, I think is kind of a neat option. Further discussion or questions? If not, with a motion and a second on the floor, then members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on a 2018 budget modification to the recycling fund.
Yep, so when we originally were looking at the recycling fund, we're always kind of late to recording our final entries for recycling because the Public Works Department is finalizing all of their allocations as to leaf pickup, which takes place, late in the fall. So when we looked at it, we were a bit shy in the recycling budget of about $17,000. If you recall, we did a very large transfer is part of the 2017 financial transactions to cover the overage. We had made some modifications when we produced the 2018 budget, realizing that those activities were costing us more than we had originally planned. And we did bolster that budget again in 2019 because, you know, we knew we were going to be close based again on the 2017 activity. So, you know, typically we try not to carry a deficit in a fund, so this would eliminate the deficit.
Okay. Do we have a motion then to approve the modification to true up the recycling fund from 2018?
I have a quick question.
Okay, let's take the motion first.
Okay.
Motion by Nutting, is there a second? Second by Martins. Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, this is because, what, the recycling fund, we're spending more on it than we're taking in? Is that what it
Right,
is?
so the recycling fund accounts for several activities. It does the recycling curbside collection that we pay Harders every month. It does the yards waste site operations and leaf collection. And that leaf collection is the one that has been, I guess, causing us problems within the fund because we've been under accounting for it as far as budgeting each year. As I said, in 2017, we did a large transfer. My recollection is it was close to $60,000 because of overages. We had, as I said, increased our 2018 budget, but not quite enough. And again, you know, it's hard to estimate how much time they're going to take. It's a accumulation of not only staff time, but all of the
Equipment?
equipment rental and from internal equipment and external equipment. So
Because they
they're-
rent that baling
The
apparatus
baler,
from outside, right?
Right.
I guess that this year, with the, well, I think both years actually, with the way the leaves fell. If they fall early or they fall late, they fall different in some areas than others. Some areas you have, I guess, different expectations for what leaf pickup is, rather than, you know, this year, you'll recall, we had some discussion about whether or not that, I mean, we know that leaf pickup is a key component of stormwater management, but within the community, there's a lot of residents that have come to see that as a service also that we provide to them, beyond stormwater management, and so their expectations often are that, you know, if something comes down late or there's a storm or whatever, that, you know, areas would be visited more than once if they were visited too early. You know, sometimes they start at both ends of the city and work their way to the middle, and then, you know, something happens, and then, you know, where they've already been, a whole bunch of leaves come down, and I think, you know, they grappled with that this year. And trying to manage the expectations of various neighborhoods and then still get stuff picked up, you know, before the snow flew. So, at least we're closer this year, but, you know, maybe when we do our 2020 budget, we'll have to maybe step that up a little bit just so that we're closer to actual. I mean, we'll maybe see what happens this fall again, but if we're short in 2019 again, maybe we should just increase our line item right off the bat for
Right.
2020 when we start that this summer. Go ahead, Mr. Nutting.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair. On occasion, I've asked for an update, Marianne, with regards to how well we're doing with regards to the curbside recycling. Quantity, does Harders give us a, here's how many tons, et cetera, that we're saving from going to Ringel?
Right.
Landfill, that might be something I could ask for in the future, just as a curiosity. And then if Madam Chair, if it'd be applicable, or Mr. Mayor, that we would have the staff give us a report on last year's leaf pickup and their thoughts, maybe that, how they would
I
do
see
it
my buddy,
differently.
Mr. Lindman, back there from Department of Public Works, and I'm sure he would be more than happy to share
didn't-
that information with you.
It
Okay.
at a different time. It'd be
Yeah,
fine.
I think we could do that. I mean, just as an informational item, I think it
Informational.
helps as we come into another budget cycle to know if we've been underestimating, you know, if it's a way bigger job than we've been calculating for, that we'd want to know that ahead of time.
Is the
So-
baler hindering? Is it, you know, give us a thought?
Okay. Yep, we certainly can get that information together. Go ahead, Dennis.
I have one more question. When we figure our budget, we figure the rental of the baler. I know that we don't keep that equipment, we rent it when we need it. But do we have to compute in staff time to run the baler and to run
Yes.
Well, what I can't understand, those people are getting paid whether baling leaves or not, are they not?
That's right. yeah.
Sure, but we budget where that activity or where that effort is being utilized. So when they're working on winter maintenance, for example, of the streets, that is a general fund activity, and so those efforts are budgeted in the general fund. But the recycling activity is budgeted in another fund. So you would be correct in that the general fund didn't experience those costs because the employees weren't working in there. And that's why we're transferring the money from the general fund into the recycling fund, because there should have been a savings there. And the reason we have a separate fund set up for the recycling fund is, again, we get a state grant for that. And these are all of the activities that are eligible for that grant, so it helps us accumulate the appropriate data so that we can do our grant reporting.
How much does the grant come out to if we get it?
It's about $170,000. I mean, we've been accounting for this in the recycling fund for, 20-plus years. Back then, we received a lot more, but
Okay, where does that money go once we get our grubby little hands on that check? What do we do with it?
it goes into the recycling fund to offset the amount of levy dollars that we have to levy for that
Okay, so
activity.
it never makes its way back to the general fund who funded it in the first place?
No. I mean, the general fund didn't fund it in the first place, because when
Well,
we
we're
set
taking
up.
money out of the general fund, if I'm not
we're-
mistaken, is that
We're
correct?
taking 20,000, yes.
Okay, so they funded part of it.
They're supplementing
small
it, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, we had a motion and a second on the floor then to approve the modification for the recycling fund. Further discussion or questions? If not, hearing and seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on a request from Impact 7 to amend their pilot agreement, which is payment in lieu of tax. You've got some documentation in your packets from that. You'll recall back, I want to say it was in January, that we had talked about this item and agreed to continue to collect that pilot payment and not cease those payments for them. Since then, there's been some correspondence back and forth, and we've got the city attorney with us if you've got some questions from her. And if you want to come up and walk us through, what your advice is as far as what you'd like to see happen here.
And I apologize for the amount of information, but in the openness, or the spirit of openness and transparency, it was
Yes.
just easier to share the emails and then try to summarize it all, because we've gone back and forth. And it's really hard to predict how this would shake out in court, given that we have an agreement that never terminates, that was never fully executed by the other party. Those are things that are not in our favor. However, we have them having made payments to us over 20 years, and now they're saying, well, we don't have a contract with you, we don't have to pay you. Well, they've been making these payments voluntarily, and we've got a lot of other evidence I didn't share with you in the form of letters leading up to the creation of this agreement. So they've made those payments. Because it's exempt from tax by statute, it's never been assessed. It doesn't have an assessment, and I've got Rick here with me tonight with his full file as well to help us with the numbers. So it's never been assessed, but we set the original basis as the construction value, and then Mary Ann calculates and sends an invoice annually based on CPI, correct, Mary Ann? The increase in CPI? So they're saying now, well, they've thrown everything out there. Well, that was never our original intent. Well, it was for it to be based on the assessment, but that assessment was set on the construction cost when the building was brand new, and it serves very low-income individuals. Nothing's changed. We still provide services to it. I don't know if there are other similar type section housing projects in our municipality that have pilot agreements. You said there was one other, Mary Ann, that you knew of, that because they asked for an extension?
Yes, Hami
payment?
Home
Okay.
pays on two different developments, and then the CDA pays.
On pilot payment as well.
Yes, on some of their housing. And that is calculated based on HUD's formula that
Okay.
they mandate.
Well, and that's the thing, I think it's always our goal to make sure that they all are on a level playing field and that they're treated consistently. And, I think that part of our discussion that we had before was that to exempt them or to just up and terminate the payment really then situates them differently than other people who've been paying it that continue to. And so I think
Well, they're
that's-
already exempt from taxation, that's why
Right.
they're not assessed, but that's why
Right.
we have a payment they're making to us in lieu of a tax.
Right.
And Rick's calculated a couple different approaches to value to try to arrive at perhaps a more reasonable or fair basis upon which to increase it by CPI every year. But their latest proposal was, we'll pay you $6,000, which was due March 1st instead of the $27,000 invoice. And then it was, okay, we'll pay you the $27,000 invoice for March 1st, but then we're done. Then you agree to terminate the agreement forevermore. That's their most recent request. So you have a lot of different options, which I outlined in the memo. You could, based on whatever information Rick's comfortable with or whatever approaches to value he worked up and can come up with a different basis upon which to calculate the amounts going forward. You could reduce the amount due May or March 1st of this year, or you could say, no, pay the $27,000 invoice this year, but going forward, we'll apply a different formula. Lots of different things you can do. Reduce or waive that payment that's already due, or say, make that payment, and we'll lower it going forward, or we'll only go forward 5 years and then we'll agree to terminate the agreement, or you pay our $27,000 invoice and we'll terminate the agreement now. Or we can just litigate all those issues and pursue the collection of the $27,000. It's, there's many combinations here of options for you.
In reading this in advance of the meeting, it seemed almost that the most reasonable option for us is to consider applying a different mode of calculation, assuming that our assessor can get the info. And so, I think that for us to just accept any payment and say going forward and commit at this point, without enough information, to commit to stop taking that payment when, other entities in a similar situation continue to pay it, I think really then represents some unequal treatment of people that are in the same boat. And so, I guess that's what we have to weigh as a committee is, whether we want to reduce this year's payment or, pursue this year's payment as billed and then offer to adjust the formula, assuming they would provide Rick with that information. Is that kind of where we're going?
Yes, and, I don't want to invite Rick up here if you don't want to hear from him or don't have questions.
We'd love
but
to hear from Rick.
He could better explain the information that was provided to him and what information he feels he may need to move forward.
Sure. Well, this facility is a little complicated in regards to that they receive this HUD payment. They're very similar to like a Section 8 or 42 housing, other than they are exempt by statute.
Okay.
So in determining, the best approach to value would probably be the income approach, and try to follow the same guidelines that like a Section 8 would be by using actual expenses and actual income. I received, some income and expenses. However, I didn't ask for all 3 years, and typically I like to ask for 3 years so they have stabilized income and expense over that period of time to come up with a little better value. But I did just run an income approach on something that would be typical of a Section 8 housing, and I'm higher than what they are requesting, the value, I guess, to be. But I am way lower than the construction cost where it's currently at.
Okay. Would it be possible for us to propose that we would revise this year's payment to the amount that Rick has come up with? That's in between. It's between the 27 and what they feel they should pay. And then offer a new approach going forward, assuming they would provide him information. I mean, that is really, a compromise where we would meet in the middle. It's not 100% of what they wanted, but it's certainly not what they were billed. But there's at least a way to substantiate Rick's numbers to date and then go forward in a more positive way with them. Would that be a
That's an option.
reasonable
That would be an option.
solution?
That would be, sounds reasonable.
What was the amount that you came up with?
Conservatively, it was $1,030,000.
Okay, and which would yield a payment of how much?
Well, if you're using the city rate, 10% of $10,000 roughly.
What are your thoughts on that committee? I mean, as far as to find a more reasonable way to calculate value. Dennis, go ahead.
I have one question. Their main defense is going to be that we really don't have an enforceable contract with them because they
Correct.
never executed it.
Correct.
So I think if we go into court with that, the judge is going to stuff it right in our ear, or any other place he feels he want to stuff it.
Very possibly.
How could that happen? How could we not have an executable contract with somebody that we've been getting, and sure, we can say that, well, you've been paying us money, and say, well, we've been doing that voluntarily, and we're not going to voluntarily do that anymore. So the crux of this, I would try to avoid litigation if I could, because I think we're going to get our hat handed to us if we go in there with
Well,
that.
and yes, 27,000 is a significant amount of money, but you know how litigation expenses add up. So yes, is it worth really litigating that payment rather than trying to work out something reasonable? I guess I would encourage you to try to avoid litigation as well.
Right? I mean, you hate to spend all that money fighting it and then end up with no net gain. I mean, that's just,
Right.
that could easily happen. Or less. I guess now we've got 5 options listed there, committee. I mean, what are your thoughts with what really amounts to be option 2? Reduce the payment due on 3/1/19 contingent upon the assessor receiving information and then calculating on a different basis going forward, assuming that the amount we would reduce it to is the amount that Rick has calculated using the data that he had available to him. I mean, that is almost a $17,000 reduction. But yet it's not the small amount that they were offering.
I think it's worth a try, but like I said, I would try to work something out, because I think if we litigate this, we're in big trouble.
Well, and it made, right, and like we said, financially, it may not be worth that effort. I mean, it just, but I think going forward, it makes sense for us to come to an arrangement with them that is similar in structure and cost to other units that are incurring those same expenses and through pilot payments. And I think if we would just say, well, we're going to walk away and not collect it anymore, you'd either have a barrage of subsequent requests from others who don't want to pay their pilot payments anymore either, or you'd have a problem where, people who are similarly situated were not treated in the same manner, and that really opens up a can of worms for the city as well. So, if we could find a fair compromise, I think that would.
And they have done this statewide, so it's not just the city of Wausau. They've been advised, I believe it was by their tax
Their
attorney.
tax attorney.
That it was irresponsible for them to make these payments, is what they told us to all the municipalities they owe throughout the state, and they were advised to stop making payments. So initially, we got just a notice saying, we're gonna breach our contract with you. And then it came out that, oh, we don't have one with you. So I've carried the ball as far as I can in trying to
Right.
keep the discussion going, but the decision is really up to the council.
Within the committee, would we have a motion then to direct staff to pursue a 3/1/19 payment in the amount that the assessor had calculated, and then endeavor going forward to use a different approach to formulate a more reasonable pilot value?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Martins. Do we have a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Mr. Nutting.
Would that future change be similar to what we're proposing tonight, or less or more? What is your guesstimation?
That's really difficult to say. There's a lot of questions that I would have in regards to their expenses. Their expenses are, put it to this way, 120%. I mean, it's like the negative cash flow. So that's not typical. However, that's why I would like to take a look at 3 years' worth of expenses and kind of whittle down what is allowable, what isn't allowable within their expenses that they are claiming. Then I would probably come up with a different number than where I'm at. So what I use is I looked at, we do get income and expense from other identities in the city, so Section 8 and 42 housing. So I did look at what they had provided me and took a basis off of that to help establish a value for this.
So this building or buildings are totally Section 8?
Well, they're very different. This is a very different than a Section 8. You know, they are exempt by statute due to the fact that they have 40 units, and of those 40 units, they all qualify for below HUD income standards of very low income. So all 40 units, so they have no market rates. So they are, you know, at the bottom of the rung of rents, so to
Yes.
speak.
Sure.
Well, and I think then if going forward, if we were to direct staff the way we were heading toward, then depending on the receipt of that information, I think with some accurate numbers, once Rick's had some time to do a little analysis and calculating, you know, then if further modification is necessary, we could certainly bring him back here and make those modifications. And, you know, if there would be a legitimate assessment and legal reason to then, you know, either reduce the payment further or, you know, see our way clear to abolish it, we need some, I guess, firm documentation for why we did that so that we can explain to other, you know, inquirers or entities why one would be different. I think that's what we would want to shake out is, you know, once he's had some time to look at it, if we would need to consider some alternate again.
I mean, they do pay their
We could do that.
water and sewer utilities, I imagine. They,
I don't think so. Don't know the answer to that, but I would hope so.
If they're users, they must be.
they must be, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With a motion and a second on the floor then, for the approach which mirrors option 2 in the packet, using the assessor's numbers for 2019, and then going forward with a new approach. Further discussion or questions? Hearing and seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you
you.
both. Let's see. Item number 5 on our agenda is discussion and possible action regarding a sole source request from the fire department for lithium battery packs and charging stations for self-contained breathing apparatuses from 5 Alarm. And you've got some sole source documentation in your packets. We've got the fire chief with us if there's some questions. Let me just follow that over to the packet. Does anyone have questions for the chief about the sole source request?
This is just in keeping with what we're currently doing in the
Correct.
past, and it's nothing it's nothing brand new, it's continuation.
Actually, it's a replacement. What we're doing is replacing our alkaline batteries with charged batteries for SCBA's. And with these, we have to change them probably every month, the alkaline batteries. So this is a rechargeable system, easily removed, easily charged, and not only that, but they're under warranty, so we never have to buy another one if they fail. We just get them replaced from the company.
So it sounds like we have the initial cost, and then it's
Yep,
gravy after that.
you bet.
Fantastic.
And there's no, you know, alkaline batteries are costly, and obviously we have to get rid of them, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion then to approve that sole source? Motion by Kelbach, second by Smith. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action regarding a sole source request from the fire department for a supplied air system, also from 5 Alarm, and you've got that documentation in the packets as well. Do you have questions for the chief on that item? If not, is there a motion to approve that sole source as well? Was that a motion, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
That is- Okay, motion by Smith, second by Kelbach. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well.
Thank you.
You bet, thank you. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for the Fire Station 2 construction. You've got some information in the packets on that as well, and perhaps the chief and Mary Ann can walk us through that. I know they've just gone through some bid opening on the new building, and they're in need of some additional funding toward that construction project. You've got some documentation on that in your packets, I guess. Anything of note that you guys want to add for?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Tell me about these doors. These seem to be a little more than a little.
Oh, switch your mic on.
Oh, I had it on. Yeah, tell me about the doors. There's $290,920. I saw some doors once that were all brass and done by famous artists. I'm not even sure they were worth that much.
that might be true. These particular doors, as you might note, that most doors, garage doors, open horizontally, so they move up. These particular doors open this way, vertically. So what happens is that, and I don't say it happens often, but when these big vehicles move out of garages, particularly ladder trucks, when they have an object in their view, they drive through doors, and because the doors go up a little bit more slowly. So since they're opening vertically, you're not going to drive forward until the doors are open. And they open much more swiftly. They're more airtight, so they keep the facility a little bit more warm. And I think that was written as an alternative, an alternate bid. So right now, well, I'd like to see those in the front of the station so we avoid some of those incidences. At a price of $290,000, since we're already over budget, obviously I would request, obviously, that modification by finance and particularly maybe council, because it is quite a bit of money and we're already over budget. But those doors are being put in all over Wisconsin and the country because of their efficiencies. So I understand the cost is somewhat exorbitant, but that was put as an alternate. So it's not in the budget right now, but that's what the cost of putting those types of doors in would be. And we would put those on the front side of the building, not the back side, because the front side we're leaving emergently, back side we're coming back non.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Nutting.
Is there anything else about those doors?
Chief, if you could, it's just a curiosity, do they roll in or do they
They're
stay?
panel doors.
Do they?
So
come in?
there's 4 panels on each side, so they waver. Or
They collapse back
They collapse
out?
back out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got the building design firm and the construction
Yeah.
management company with us today if you have questions, specific questions on the design or the bids.
Yeah,
So
let me just mention, the bids went out sometime mid-March. They came back last week, April 2nd. They were opened by Board of Public Works. Obviously, we spoke to the mayor afterwards. Obviously, he's informed of where the budget is right now, and he's been intimately involved with this project. As Lisa has just said, I do have Wendell here, Robert Grzanowski, and also Myron, Tony Cretin, and Lee Spindler, if there's questions as well. I think it was, we're coming back, and I'll try to talk somewhat intelligently about this, but there's any follow-up questions, I'll let these guys actually speak as well. But I think after talking to the mayor and after the bids came in, obviously you can see by the bid tab, we didn't get as many bids as we had anticipated, as we were hoping for competitive reasons. And I know Myron went out and did some solicitation as to, as the bids were coming in and saying, why aren't you bidding? And I think the overwhelming response to them was that there's so much work right now that they're very particular about the projects they're bidding on. And in actuality, I think part of that message was they just don't have the time.
Sure.
They're very, very busy. And obviously that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. So, I think that one of the contracts that we looked at fairly heavily was the general building trades. We were hoping that was going to be a little bit more competitive because obviously that's a very high base bid, and we only got 2 bidders on that. So
and then the fire suppression too, you said there was only one, right, from?
You bet.
Yep.
From Apex.
The thought, though, as I was reading through this, and then, I was, I guess, involved a little bit on the front end with, selection of the construction management firm and some of the design considerations of the building. One of the things that we know is that with Station 2, it's in a high-profile location, and it's a public building that we really want to be proud of and that we want the community to be proud of because, it's decades and decades in between constructions of stuff like this. I mean, our last firehouse, Station 2, is very nondescript in its appearance and its function. I mean, in fact, it's under-functioning. But separate from that, Central was built, a generation ago. And so I think the fact that these buildings do stand the test of time and that they will last, decades into the future, I think that we need to build it to the best industry standard that we have available today. And I think a lot of creativity has gone into the design to maximize the use of a small lot and a small space to get as much out of that new building as we possibly can. But I think if we can add some efficiencies either through reduction in the potential for property damage by adding these different doors, and then even increase the energy efficiency a little bit for the length of time that a door that size sits open, that may be money well spent. I think that we should give serious consideration to some modification to make sure that we're getting the best product we can possibly get, because, we won't build another Station 2 for probably 40 or 50 years. So it's something that we need to have an eye to the future on, I feel. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Obviously, in the interest of public safety, and then when we got this last week, I wanted to let all of you know, not only here on the Finance Committee, but also on the City Council, public safety is utmost the biggest concern that we all have for our public. Yes, we had some overruns. We did have some surprises, but I want you folks to know about that right away and to advocate for it. It's the right thing to do, and it should be taken care of. If you got any questions, let me know. I did contact the council president and Mary Ann from Finance just to make sure that this would be brought forward for your attention.
And here we are.
Tonight. And here we are.
Mr. Nutting, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I would agree with you, Madam Chair and Mr. Mayor. The thought I had is, in the traditional doors that we have right now, and obviously to prevent that early exit before the door is fully up, isn't there a red light, green light within the eye view of the driver, say, okay, you are ready to go, the light go and gun it? Or is there also a history on this newer style door of its reliability to be reliable for the test of time rather than having an issue with the mechanics of the door creating a future cost? So if you might elaborate, or your crew.
You bet. I'll comment about the first question first. When I was back in Stevens Point, we actually had the red, yellow, green light for our ladder truck because we had driven through the doors on occasion a couple times. So and that was something new, and so we put it up, and lo and behold, and again, you can't see the top of the door, so you're relying on the red, green light. Green light goes on, we go out, and that actually failed. So we actually drove through the door because when the basket is in front of you, you can't see the top of the door.
Okay. Yeah.
So that actually failed because we were counting on that, and we drove through the door. So that's a reliability issue. When they open vertically, you can see the full extent of the door, so you're not going to be driving forward. Yeah, because it's opening this way.
Yeah.
So there's no visually you can see it entirely. And if we, and I never want to say never, but if we drive through something like that, we probably have a bigger problem on our hands, because everybody should know that they need to obviously wait to see the doors are fully open, and it's very easy to tell when that occurs. As far as the maintenance, and you talk about, I talked to the Verona Fire Chief. I've talked to a lot of the chiefs that have just recently installed these type of doors, and they say maintenance is easy right now. And I don't know, Brian has the numbers, but like our doors at Central Station, we spend a lot of money to maintain those doors. And granted, they're 20 or 25 years old, so that has something to do with it. But these mechanically are so balanced and mechanically sound that very little maintenance is needed on these types of doors, is my understanding. The departments that have installed them just love them.
Can they be opened
Manually.
Manually? Okay.
And and you'd think they would be very heavy because they're big doors, but they're so
That's another
balanced.
thing, too.
All you
Okay.
have to do is pull a cord, and basically you can almost push it with one finger, and you can push it to the side. Where obviously the doors going up, if those fail, you're lifting and pushing and pulling, so it's much more difficult to try to get an emergency vehicle out of a door that brings up a good point, that fails when it's going up, because most of the time, you're leaving that vehicle in-house until you get back.
Thank you.
Now, with that, I guess with the action that's needed from us tonight, are you requesting that we would approve a modification to the construction budget to account for these items based on the bids that were received? Is that, are you
Yes.
ready for us to do that tonight?
And just for your information, the mayor has requested that we do a presentation to council tonight, so we'll be starting off with that. And again, as he had mentioned just now, for transparency's purposes, so both Wendell and Myron are going to stay for the council meeting as well, so we're going to be doing that presentation right at the beginning of council.
That sounds great. Do we, I guess let's take a motion in a second, and then if we need to discuss further, we can. Do we have a motion then to modify the original construction contract budget to include these items as listed in the staff report?
I'll move that.
We have a motion from Mr. Nutting. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Kelbach. Further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Dennis.
So what we're saying here, and, you know, Chief, you know I love you, but $290,000, almost $291,000. And then, Mary Ann, you, on your memo, you say it's going to, a 20-year bond's going to add $70,000 to the levy. Is that interest, or what does that $70,000 come from?
Well, so we have a long-term financial plan that examines our debt retirement. If you recall, when we were working on the budget, we've not had to increase our property tax levy for many, many years for debt retirement because we pay off debt at a rate that our new debt remains affordable. So this would be an increase in our outstanding debt, and its retirement would require us to increase the levy to retire both the principal and the interest. So the state law says that we can increase our levy by any amount of debt service retirement. You know, we live under levy limit rules and under expenditure restraint, and debt service is exempt from both of those calculations. But you still want your levy and your tax rate to be affordable. So,
Sure.
you know, in this situation, it's competing with inflationary pressures that take place out of our general operating budget and our other capital requests. So if you approve this modification, what I'm saying is we will have to increase the debt service levy by $70,000 annually for that entire likely 20 years, because again, we've been doing long-term projections. We know about what we invest in our streets and other capital each year and what we borrow each year. And based on those computations, that levy increase would remain in place for the ongoing future.
So at 70,000, that's just under 3 cents.
Correct.
I mean, that's your debt levy portion of the mill rate then would increase by maybe something like .028 or 0.27 or something like that. I mean, just, you'd be just under 3 cents. 25,000 is a penny, usually. So that's kind of where you'd be going, you know, and then obviously we can modify our budget in other facets
That's correct.
to account for that. So if we had to, you know, modify by, you know, just under 3 cents for debt service, then we would either, you know, reduce expenses, or we could even reduce capital. You know, we've been earmarking increased funds into infrastructure, which if we can hope in the new administration down in Madison, that we can hope for some increased aids from the state coming back to local municipalities. Early indications seem to think that they want to make some investments in those things beyond what we had seen in the prior administration. So, you know, I think it's possible that we could gain some ground there in our budget process, where we wouldn't have to assume that the mill rate is automatically going up overall that much. I mean, we maybe could make some other adjustments that would be offsetting or close to it.
I think I've just heard an explanation how we're going to borrow $290,000 and we're actually going to save money. I don't know how that works
Well, we won't
out.
save money, we'll just have to spend a little less elsewhere
So
in
this
our budget.
70,000, if I may get back to it, if this 70,000, that's per year for 20 years?
Yes,
Okay.
in all likelihood, yes.
That's a
I
lot
mean,
of
20
money.
years is a long time to project,
Yeah, I mean,
But,
I'll be
you
sitting
know,
in there on
given,
somebody's
as I
shelf by then, but,
given the financial demands that we have in other areas, along with the debt that we currently hold, there would be no expected reduction in the levy for debt service in the near future.
And Mary Ann, that's not just for the 290,000, that's for the entire budget.
The whole
right?
project, right? The whole
that-
building?
That's for the whole building,
That's for the increase.
increase of the
The
building.
increase in the building.
Increase in the building.
Which is
So-
the doors and everything else that has
Yeah.
come in high.
Right.
Right.
And is that assuming that you would end up at the highest possible number? Because you had a range there of
Right,
563 to
that was-
854.
Right, the range
So guessing
anticipated
conservatively?
whether we were going to purchase those doors or not.
Right, and your estimates are normally conservative, so that 70,000 is if we end up at the 854, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if we
How-
come in
how-
slightly under?
how often have people driven through the doors? I mean, let's face it, that's an error.
Yes,
You don't drive through the doors.
you bet.
I know that one time when I was filling up my squad car, I drove off because I got a call with these hose still in my car. And I didn't realize it until I got to the call. I said, oh, what's that hanging out? Oh, that's the hose from the gas pump. That's not good. Yeah. I got called on the carpet for that and ended up paying for it. However, it would appear to me that does it happen frequently? I mean, is that something that happens a couple times a year or so on, that people
No.
drive through the doors?
No, not at all. It doesn't happen frequently, and that's one of the things, but I think the other thing with these types of doors is the ongoing maintenance of these doors. And if I would say the life of these doors are going to cost me $290,000, I'm not quite sure if it will, but what I'll tell you is those overhead doors that go up and down horizontally cost me a whole lot of money to maintain. In Stephen's point, I know we had two occasions in my 25 years down there, and I know in Wausau, I heard of at least one story of them going through a door and damaging the building, and the ladder truck had to go in and get some work. So, and at a substantial cost, I think it was maybe $100,000, and they ended up restructuring the building and also obviously repairing the ladder truck. But I don't know, Mary Ann, if you remember that, you have some history in the city.
Sorry, I don't.
Okay. It's a story to me, so I've heard the story, but obviously I wasn't here for that. But, so no, it doesn't happen often. I just think of the failure of doors, the maintenance of doors, and for 50 years or 40 years, how much it costs, I don't know. Just a couple months ago, we paid almost $1,800 just to have a door spring fixed and, I don't know, balanced and whatever else they did. So I'm not quite sure what that maintenance cost. And I've been assured of the fact that, can either you guys talk about the maintenance of these types of doors? I think obviously they have a lot of experience with installing them and quoting them, so.
I'm Robbie with Five Bugles Design. The doors we put in at Marshfield too, so if you are familiar with the Marshfield Fire Station, it's at Marshfield, Verona. It is a bifold door, right? So there's 4 panels, similar to what you'd see in a closet in your home. It goes to the side on hinges. Tracy's absolutely right. They're well balanced. So much so where she said where you hit the cord and you push it over versus, if you have power failure, you just pull the cord and push it over the side, whereas a large overhead door, you got chains and you're going like this until you get it up into the certain area, So maintenance, we've seen definitely less maintenance, no springs, standard overhead has springs, tracks. This is a very simple mechanism, just a motor on top with some lever action, and it's a gear, and it turns and it opens and shuts. We did a study, it was 10 years ago, so it's probably not very accurate right now, but Marshfield went through the same thing that you did, wondering, payback, essentially. They were interested in hearing payback. Our mechanical engineers tried to do a little study, because obviously a regular overhead door, anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds to open and close, where this is, I think, 8 seconds, and I may even be a little long on that. So as far as energy savings, we did a little study, and they came back with about a 14-year payback. Again, that was 10 years ago, though, a little outdated, but, good information to have.
Sure. Okay. Additional questions? If not, then the motion we have on the floor is then to modify the construction budget for the new station to include the costs as indicated in the staff memo per the bids that were opened, including the doors. Do we have additional questions? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we'll record 1 no. And then the full city council will get a presentation on the entire station project in a few minutes here too as a
Yep. And then the budget modification will come to the next council,
council meeting, correct?
not tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Item number 8 on our agenda is discussion and possible action regarding the Mountain Lanes redevelopment and an application for assistance received from Locre. And in the Economic Development Committee last week, we had some discussion with them. Locre came in and they now own the Mountain Lanes project. They submitted a plan and have requested some TID assistance that you see outlined in the staff memo. I had asked in the Economic Development Committee if the concept was a reverse TID, where we'd have results before the investment gets made, and that answer was yes. Let's see, we've got Chris Schock with us if you have questions for him about the plan. This plan was certainly better articulated than the other project that they were there for that evening, so this one seemed quite complete. I guess, do you want Chris to come up and present, or do we have some questions for him?
Questions?
Okay, come on up, Chris.
Okay, let me get my notes out here. Okay, I recall in not too distant past, very close to where this project is going to go, and this, actually, Chris, isn't addressed to you, it's addressed to Lisa. When we were on the Finance Committee, we had a dental clinic being built there, and they asked for what would account to chump change compared to this project, and we pretty much told them to go pound sand. That project would have created about 15 jobs. This one, I think, is going to create 1 full-time and 1 part-time job. But my biggest concern is the rents. 47% of the households in Wausau make less than $35,000 a year, according to our website. And I know that's old data, but that's what's on our website. If these people making that were going to rent one of these apartments, a 1-bedroom apartment with a garage, they're going to spend 35% of their income on housing. If they're going to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, they're going to spend 48% of their total income on housing. And that doesn't include utilities. The normal accepted percent on spending on housing for a family is 30%. So I would have a difficult time giving money to this outfit unless they can provide some of these units to be for people with more moderate incomes. We forget about those people. I think that too often we chase the tax base, which is not a bad thing, but we have to understand we were elected to represent the people, not the tax base. We're going to represent all the people, and people out there that can't afford these kind of rents. And another concern I have is we have a project going on Westwood Drive that has a ton of apartments that are upscale, and we have another one going on Stevens Drive and 17, which are upscale. And then we have some people keep on threatening to build something down on the riverfront, and we don't know if that's ever going to happen or not. And that's going to be upscale. So, do we really, and I guess we want to attack the millennials, but if you talk to the millennials, some of them are still living in their parents' basement, and they're complaining about their college loans they have to pay off. They're putting off getting married, they're putting off having children, they're putting off buying houses, but somehow they're going to be able to afford, $1,400 for rent for a 2-bedroom, 1-garage apartment. I just wondering, when are we going to address people that maybe don't make $85,000 a year, and with city money being put into these projects? And this is not, and I realize you didn't put this proposal together. You're just a messenger. I don't want to beat up on the messenger, but these are my concerns, and I think they're legitimate concerns.
Let me start off with the difference in the dental office first, as an Economic Development Committee member. The dental office that you talk of, that's just up the street on the other side of the Plaza Hotel, that project in the Economic Development Committee did not pass a but-for test. For TID assistance, you have to pass a test that says but-for public assistance, the project cannot happen. And so the reason
Well, what about this one?
Well, the reason this one didn't, the dentist office didn't pass the but-for test is because they came in and said that first, they started the project on an assumption that they were going to get city assistance before we had the option to vote and even say yes or no at the recommendation of their contractor. So they were already underway and incurring some overly inflated costs for landscaping and site prep with the assumption that we were going to swoop in and help, and that assumption was encouraged by their contractor. But that said, then, they did come in and say, well, but for public assistance, the project can't happen. But we were clear that it was going to happen anyway because they already had building permits pulled and they were underway in the project. So at that point, we didn't feel that the but-for test was met, and so we voted down, even though they wanted less money. The entire process seemed convoluted and inappropriate, so we voted against that aid that was being asked for because they were too far down the path and didn't even give us a chance to say yes or no. They just assumed that we would say yes, and we didn't. So that's the difference there. At least they're asking on the front end and nothing's being built.
Well, but do you feel if we tell them that, no, we're not going to give any money, they're not going to do the project? They already bought the property.
On this one?
Yeah.
That we don't know. I mean, they didn't come in and specifically say, we can't do the project if we don't get TID assistance, but there's so much work that needed to be done on the site, given the terrain and the fact that the existing building needs to be removed, and the difference in value, the TID test, we felt was met based on reduction in blight. Because Mountain Lane sitting the way it sits is, if it's not blight already, it's headed in that direction. So I think that was why it was easier to meet that standard in the Economic Development Committee last week, because they had a plan fleshed out that not only creates some jobs with the medical clinic component, but they're also then removing a building that's, in need of major repair to be used for anything, which is essentially now useful for nothing, based on what had been done to it, and then creating tax base that was well in excess of what Mountain Lanes ever would have been worth. And I think that's, at least as an ED member, I felt that that was of value. And so I was able to compartmentalize that and separate that from, the request that we had received 2 years ago from the dentist.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing.
No, I totally agree.
the
But
committee.
no, that's
But what
just the
I'm-
rationalization for why we felt one was different.
What I'm saying is, and I'm not even opposed to providing some assistance. I realize that is a blighted building, and it would be nice to have apartments there. What I'm concerned about is we keep on focusing on spending city money on upscale apartments, and there's a lot of people in Wausau that would like to have a decent place to live that they could afford.
True.
But we seem to be thumbing our nose at them and say, well, if you can't afford $1,400 or $1,000 a month for rent, we're really not concerned about you.
Which is Chris's department, so I'm going to shift to him because I was just answering your question about the dentist deal.
Yeah, no,
So go
glad
ahead.
to answer, and I guess I'll remember this moment when we come back for assistance with affordable housing options too. But I would note that the city has, participated on multiple affordable housing projects, including the Atrium Loft project just most recently, and, and part of the Thomas Street duplexes are also held affordable, as part of our incentives for that project. So, we completely agree, from a staff perspective. I think every housing study that we have completed, including the most recent one done by Place and Main Advisors in collaboration with the WEDC, which focused on the mall, but, looked at the demographics of Wausau as a whole, noted the need for a diversification of housing at both ends of the spectrum. Every community in the country needs more affordable housing, because in general, housing is non-affordable, less so in Wausau than in some larger markets, but actually statistically, every county in the country does need additional affordable housing. So it's a valid concern, of course. But what Wausau also needs is, kind of higher-end rental and for-sale options that, kind of accommodate professionals, because compared to our peers, we don't have those same level of offerings. Even though we have some of the highest wage and job growth in the state, it hasn't necessarily translated to, to housing options within the community. So, as you know, the city's kind of stated goal, or the ED committee's stated goal, is diversification of housing types, which means we're really looking at both extremes. Wausau has a lot of housing in the, currently that kind of fires in the middle of the range, and that's a fine thing demographically. But we obviously, these studies do continue to show that we need more high-end options on the rental side, and we need more affordable options. And so we are doing both projects. When you consider our participation or our funding that's gone to these projects, we funded both affordable projects and we funded high-end projects as well.
All right, what projects that we have in work now that would you say would be on the low end of the spectrum?
Well, there's a couple things, there's a few that aren't announceable yet, let me put it that way, but there's, we are working on some options for more affordable housing options.
It is Trolley Flats is one of those, right, where a number of the units are
sure.
controlled?
Yeah, obviously, the city heavily incentivized Savo Supply, and I'm sure you were against it at the time, but, we did discuss, the city's resources going into that project and the importance of, purchasing the property, renovating it extensively, remediating asbestos and lead, and then repositioning it. Took 3 RFPs, 3 different RFP cycles, to find or to kind of get the right performa and right developer to complete the project. But now it's done, and those units are affordable units. Trolley Quarter was the same way. The city led that project. The city led the renovation of the federal building. We do, like I said, the Thomas Street duplexes have an affordable component to them. And we are working actually right now on a potential project that I hope will be announceable very soon. There's some sensitivity on that, but you'll obviously be aware of that when it's
Just for the
ready
record,
to
I think
roll.
the Savo project started before I became an alderman,
Oh, sure. Well, that's great, yeah.
so I couldn't have voted against it.
Let's say theoretically.
I
but
think-
I might have,
I would
who
be
knows?
glad
I
to-
think I
been
might have,
alderman.
but yeah, I
We
don't know.
will,
I
we will
mean,
bring more affordable projects, that the city should encourage as well. Again, I think we're not adverse to diversifying housing choice on both ends of the spectrum, but that's been the stated strategy of the committee. You don't have to necessarily agree with it, but.
Okay, and this one, I guess, part of our consideration too is that our participation percentage was, compared to its total value, relatively low, and that it was results-based, so that it was a reverse TID, not one that was giving them money up front that they would have to have results before they get that money
Yeah, and
from us.
Also, just to clarify, not to add more, but to the dental clinic, the whole area there, Financial Way, was heavily incentivized in its original layout. So the city installed the street and water and sewer utilities and incentivize the regrading of those properties to be development ready. So one of the considerations too was when they came back in and said, now we'd like additional TIF, we felt like from a staff perspective that the city had already participated extensively by preparing that site for redevelopment. Obviously in this case, as Lisa pointed out, there is a blighted building, there is topography that needs to be worked with, there is, considerations that are, going to be expensive for any potential developer to retool mountain lanes to be meaningful, and we think this use is very meaningful. It does fit the strategy of the city.
Okay. With that, do we have additional questions for Chris? Did we have a motion? I don't know. Okay. This is one where we did not yet have a motion. If we need to discuss more, we can, but can we get a motion on the floor? Do we have a motion to approve the assistance into the project?
I'll make that motion, Madam
A
Chair.
motion by Nutting, is there a second? Second by Martins. Now, is there further discussion or questions?
Just a comment,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it just amazes me that members of the public would comment and complain about a developer wanting to build a certain development just because it may not fit into that particular individual's future needs or desires when it probably wasn't intended to in the very beginning. We shouldn't hinder a developer from developing something as long as that it meets within the ones that are doing the research as to what they can afford as well as what they can develop. And it doesn't fall on our shoulders to say, well, you can't do that because our community can't afford that. Would I hinder a store opening up downtown selling high-end clothing, high-end appliances, et cetera, just because maybe, someone can't go and shop there? It's just a foolish argument that we would hinder that.
Well, the market, I think, has to
When they
dictate
open up
whether or
that
not they're
store-
successful.
When they open up that store, they wouldn't be asking for any city money. Anytime we spend city money, we have to look at it at a critical eye, Mr. Nutting.
Understood.
And we just can't make a a decision and say, well, these people can't afford it, so they can, they can go up a rope for all we care. It's just one of those things. When we spend city money, we represent everybody. Just not, as I said before, just not the tax base. I would suggest you keep that in mind.
Well, I was commenting on those that would make this, this comment outside of what we're doing at this point in time, because I've heard it said on a number of occasions that, through media, that this shouldn't be developing because it's not meeting the needs of the masses. Well, it wasn't intended to meet the needs of the masses.
I think that a lot of the housing projects that we've seen spring up in recent years have just a different appeal to different people. I mean, we've created things that, young families may not appreciate because it doesn't have enough yard and it doesn't have enough space, but, by the same token, we've created things that, a demographic that maybe is trying to retire and doesn't want all of the external maintenance and things might appeal to them. It doesn't have as much driveway, it doesn't have as much yard to take care of. So, I think that we're trying to get to a mix where we have something for everybody, but not a ton of each one so that we're overbuilt in one area or another. I think we're trying to keep that balance. But, it does make sense that, even if we invest in the project, the market is going to have to dictate whether it's going to be successful. Obviously they're competing with other projects, some incentivized and some not, but I think that, whether or not the private sector is successful in an endeavor they undertake, it's going to have to prove itself out. Do we have additional discussion? If not, I'll take a vote. With a motion on the floor, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. We've got just a couple extra items on our agenda. We've got item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding sole source request from the police department for Motorola radios from Northway Communications. You'll recall that a while back, as part of our CIP, we had also purchased a volume of new Motorola equipment from Northway because they're the local vendor with local service, and it was much easier for them to get their product worked on if we shopped local for it. And so we had right along been approving those purchases through Northway so that they could get that local service and get things worked on quickly versus a shop that, is who knows where, and they have to send their stuff in and then be without it. We've got the police chief with us if you have questions about the request. This one didn't seem much different from all the others.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Nutting to approve. We have a second. Second by Kelbach. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well.
Take 11 next.
Yep, let's take item number 11 because we're low on time. Discussion and possible action regarding a statement for purposes of ADA Title II compliance. And this item came to us from the city attorney's office. Let me just flip forward in the packet here. And let me just bring it up here at the end. Here we are. And I guess, do we want to walk through this quickly? I mean, as far as, I don't know. I struggle with the materials in the packet. Are they? I don't see it.
Ann, do you want to come up and summarize? I had read through it. It sounded like it would be pretty expensive for the city.
Okay, so this is the closed captioning
to implement
study?
the closed caption, and because it's cost prohibitive, we would be able to submit a disclosure.
Right.
And that, because we're a government entity, that would suffice.
Right.
But,
Yep, and then we've got Dave Dickinson also from Public Access who can kind of walk us through a little bit. We've been looking at closed captioning for a while. There was so much material in the packet, I
Right.
couldn't get my packet to catch up, but
Mary Ann provided a good summary. Dave's good with the numbers, but all my materials are just meant to say that we're going to follow the attorney's opinion whom we hired to study this, and they felt that we could claim an administrative or financial burden if it was a burden on the department rather than the budget of the whole city.
Correct.
And clearly it is, but we can't always predict or gauge how much a closed captioning option would cost. That's why you were provided the entire report, so you can see all the options that were presented, but I'll let Dave say a few words.
okay.
Yes, and I'm sorry about the numbers, because one of our problems is we haven't done it before. We are currently using YouTube to caption, which is free. We would have to get into the process to really have a good handle on the administrative burden part of it. but we estimate about $4,000 a year for the administrative burden of just managing the process. Also, the packages are all over the place because the technology is evolving so fast right now. Which is why we recommend that we use YouTube now and continue to monitor the amount that it would cost to buy packages. If the cost comes down fast enough, we could do that. If the technology gets good enough that we don't have to buy anything, then we're better off that way. In the meantime, in recognition of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we would have to monitor it annually.
Sure.
And come back and keep that in our package.
Okay. I think it totally makes sense. I think with the fact that technology and it gets better and cheaper as it evolves, it certainly makes sense, like you said, to continue to monitor it. And when it gets to a point that it's not so cost prohibitive, I mean, obviously we want to create a product that appeals to all of our viewers, all of our residents. But, I think we have a while to go to get to that point. Dennis, go ahead.
I noticed on some of the TV channels, they say closed captioning brought to you by, at Joe's Diner or so on.
Yes.
Have we sought out the possibility of getting an outside organization?
No, I haven't done that.
Is that something we should maybe explore?
The amount of time that it would take to do it, right now I don't have that time, but we could try that. To be
I
honest,
think it would be
I don't
simple as
think that
writing
we
a
would
couple
get-
letters out to, various organizations and asking them if they would, and it can be split among, and it doesn't have to be all one company or so on. There's all kinds of foundations around here that provide money for good causes, and I think certainly providing services to our people that are hearing impaired would definitely be a worthwhile service.
Yeah, we could definitely attempt to seek sponsorship.
Now, is YouTube used right now for live programming or pre-recorded programming?
Pre-recorded,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So that's the goal we'd be heading for, is to do something with our live feed as well, once
Yep.
the technology allows.
Yes.
But the YouTube transcription is not perfect, but it's accurate enough on the pre-recorded stuff, right? Did you say 95% roughly?
I feel it's about 80%. It really depends. If microphones are used properly, it's
Yeah.
better. If you're using a lot of colloquialisms, it's going to be worse.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So really what we're asking the committee to do tonight is just adopt the statement that the attorneys recommended to us. We've tweaked it a little bit, but recommend that you adopt that statement as the city's statement of an administrative and financial burden that we can place on file.
Sure, and then we'll keep
review
an eye
annually.
toward
Yes.
the future.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion then to approve that statement and forward it?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed? None are opposed. I think what we'll do is we'll hold item number 10, because it was not a priority rush item to start with. We'll hold that for our next meeting in 2 weeks. And then at that point, I'll accept a motion to adjourn so we can begin council.
Move to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn from Nutting, is there a second by Kilbach? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed. We'll stand adjourned and we'll reset here for about 5 minutes and then we'll get council going. Thank you, everyone.